welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ali Darami, and as ever, my co-host is Mahmoud Mboj. Mr. Mboj, once again, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ali. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And for those viewers who are watching for the first time, we always explain how this show works. We take 10 stories, big stories from the week, and we go through them in the next hour or so. And we go both home and abroad this time. So let's get cracking with the first story. You'll hear lots of stuff about voter attestations and about disputes to do with elections. I won't be surprised to wake up and find somebody saying that unborn babies are being registered. So ridiculous are some of the claims. Anyway, have a listen to this one.
We've gone further to check also. It is said that a particular officer of the Gambia Police Force that goes by the name ASP Lamin Balo confirmed this story. And when we check in our records, we don't have any officer by that name holding that rank of ASP as well. That means there is no ASP Mbalo within the Upper West Coast Police Division as well. So this is the clarification. We've been following it up to ensure that we get the right information to the general public. And so we want people to understand that there is no place in the at Farato or anywhere else within West Coast region where we got any report of people getting arrested for false attestation.
I think SP Njai there says it all, Mr. Mboj. We might still be voting with marbles, but when it comes to fake news, we're up there with the most sophisticated of electorates. This one particularly, and I don't want to sort of damage the reputation of any young journalist, but there was essentially a young journalist who published a story that people actually took and ran with it. I mean, what were your own views when you heard the story and then the rebuttal?
Absolutely. A fictitious police officer confirmed it. So this is it. We talk about this all the time. We should keep the clear lines between journalism and activism. Sometimes when it's so enthusiastic, you want to prove something so much. Right. You know what I mean? So perhaps as a journalist, where you should be cautious and wary and look for the details, the evidence, as it were, the confirmation, then you just prematurely go and publish because, I don't know, you want to scoop? Or is it naivety?
Well, that was my... for me, it's kind of a mixture of all of the above. You know, a young person who the rumors have been circulating, and this is something, I mean, you and I work here at QTV, and we admonish our younger colleagues and say, look, don't run with the first story you pick up on social media, because it's been swirling around on social media that, you know, people are getting, you know, false attestations. And of course, then people ask the question, why have they not been arrested? So for somebody to come up with the scoop of being the first article about arrest seemed like scoop of the month, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You must never rely on a single source, really.
Yeah.
we tell them all the time.
This is
absolutely.
And, you know, unfortunately, you know, the sort of young man has been given the kind of ultimate sanction. He's been relieved of his duties, you know, sacked, effectively. But Njai mentioned there, you know, actually the fictitious policeman. So this kind of went a step further. So it wasn't just, you know, they say, you know, and if you published all the stories where they say, the kind of unnamed they says, we'd all be publishing them.
Yes.
We say to people, check your facts.
That's it. It seems, and this one, you're right, it seems deliberate. It seems premeditated.
Yes, the manufacturing.
This is the manufacturing. This is actually disinformation, as it were. Yeah. So absolutely. So there will be people like that because they have an agenda.
Yes.
There's a certain picture that they want to portray, and they don't mind hitting below the belt.
I mean, you give somebody an entirely plausible sounding name.
Absolutely.
From an entirely plausible sounding region of the country.
Yes, absolutely.
And people think, he's even spoken to somebody, and you quoted him at length, and he even said he had the tape, then refused to produce it either to the police or to his employers.
Absolutely.
Which kind of cut the legs from under the story.
You see, by now, I mean, the kids, they have to wake up to the fact that they need to be savvy. It is not simply using it. Sure. As they say, you don't, when you go to these technologies, you don't get intelligence there. You actually take your intelligence to it.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Yeah. So we got to know how to navigate these things, how to look for credibility, as it were, of sources, integrity, double, triple sourcing, reputable sources. So we need to be savvy to know the ways of the world. You know what I mean?
And one of the reasons I chose this in kind of selfish journalistic reason as the first story is because I think it's a kind of salutary lesson for all editors to say even your most trusted journalists now, because of what has happened with this particular story and the way this kind of contestation over not just attestation but the very registration, and sorry for the alliteration, it seems, this wanting to be first and so on, everybody wants to get a jump on because, oh, this is a scoop, nobody else has got it. It's going to force editors now to stop and think and double and triple check their facts. Surely.
Absolutely. And this will also perhaps begin a debate kind of between journalists, conventional journalists, and what we do on social media.
Sure.
We try to make the distinction, and how journalists, how we practice our craft would help and people really see the distinction.
Yeah.
We will have the credibility, integrity, deep research. It's an entirely different ball game from social media. We have to help people do that. Otherwise, we are all tarnished. We are tarred with the same brush, so they don't make the distinction. I think this is the key now. So therefore, perhaps whatever they read on social media, they will say, just see it as the media. And we are part of that vague, amorphous, soup of all sorts.
Yeah.
But ours is not quite like that. Ours is really actually a very disciplined practice, a disciplined craft.
Yeah.
So
and this is the debate I have because I belong to, it seems like 100 WhatsApp groups. And this is the debate I have with people in that group. I said, when I say I'm a journalist, I'm not being snobbish. I'm just saying the reason I haven't shared certain things or won't share certain things or I cast doubt on certain things is the kind of lack of checking. There's no veracity to it. You say, oh, a friend who I trust sent it to me. But did that friend check it? Have you checked it before you shared it? And 9 times out of 10, they didn't, and it's fake.
That's exactly it. I think this is what they call the vocational, as it were, elements of your profession, what you do. Yeah. And then, but when you expand it to this dimension, then the ethics of it comes into play. Stuff like that. Yeah. So it is not simply about knowing about the inverted pyramid and how to structure a story. Absolutely, that sort of thing. Right. But it's also about the ethics of it. Sure. The stuff that gives you sense of honor.
I'm glad. Sense of honor. Journalists, who'd have thought it? Thanks, Mr. Mboj. Now on to another lot of people who've been arrested. And again, this is kind of familiar, depressing tale if you live here in the Gambia or anywhere along the western coast of Africa, particularly for us, we're all aware of it. And these are migrants trying to get away to what they think are greener pastures. Have a look, have a listen.
But prior to the arrival of the boat, we got this intelligence, and in a timely manner, we were able to hit up those targets, arresting these people.
All of those apprehended had apparently paid huge sums of money to the so-called agent who promised to take them to the dreamland. This begs the question, who is this agent and how much money did they pay to be included in the traveling list?
These migrants, according to the investigations so far, have paid some huge amounts of money, ranging from 25,000 to 45,000 Gambian dollars. One of them revealed to the investigators that he have paid about $900 to be able to embark on the journey. But this $900 was not enough for the agents, and they have to go to his household to collect some household belongings that will be used to make up for the rest of the money that he needs to pay for the journey.
That one, very much a developing story. Nonetheless, I chose it, and as if you're a regular viewer to this program, you would have seen that that was a longer excerpt than we normally play, because I wanted different aspects of the story to come through in what was there, the amount of money, the sting operation that led to them being arrested and so on. And, people from different nationalities came here to the Gambia. And, as I said, it's a developing story. 2 of the women from Sierra Leone, And I have to say, this is not giving you any confidence. They managed to call me through a journalist phone from the cell where they were being detained. Said they travelled from Kuwait to come here specifically for this journey. Mr. Mboj, this back way, as they call it here in the Gambia, is it ever going to end?
Absolutely, but you see, it is actually a global village. Yeah. I think this really demonstrates it. Yeah. And I understand that they were also waiting for the vessel from Senegal.
That's right.
To come and pick up.
And you know, when I say this is a developing story, Mr. Mboj, let me tell you the latest development that we have on that is that the immigration people actually think that the agent was scamming these people and that there was no vessel coming from Senegal. So he was just going to take their money, abandon them, and you know, abandon them to their fate. Absolutely. But it's the lure of it that people are paying 900 plus. So if we assume that the goods they went and took from this gentleman's house, which he'd already paid $900, I'm assuming it's more than $100 worth. So one individual has paid $1,000. 37 arrested, and apparently another 50 or 60 got away. I mean, we're talking serious numbers and serious money.
Absolutely, absolutely brutal, isn't it? And then one would wonder, why don't you use that $900 to invest in something? So you're remarkable that we are in this sort of warped kind of world, warped pattern of thinking. It's just beyond belief. Yeah. So the lure. So this is
it blinds them to opportunities here.
Opportunities here they wouldn't see here. Yeah. So it's like you've got this light really shone in your face. You cannot see anything. You really cannot see. You're blinded by the light. So that's what they see. Yeah. So this is it. It seems we are going through a kind of wave. I didn't know how else to put it. No. You know, we reviewed Samben Usman's Mandabi, his wonderful classic film, and where he says something like, somehow with us now, Africa exports its youth, its optimism. Sure. I mean, really, our future. We've lost hope so much. Now we import cash. Yes. The remittances, no wonder it is about 25% of. But that is really not what you want.
It's not.
And it's really not what you want.
It's interesting you mentioned this thing about exporting hope, etc., and our youth and so on, because when I spoke to the Sierra Leoneans, first thing I asked them, how many of you are there? And they said, 12 of us. I said, and do you know each other? And they said, yes, we do. And I said, okay, so you are 12. And you've paid $45,000 each. I said, why didn't you put that together and start a business? That would be a serious amount of money. But the guy said, no, actually, we hadn't thought of it. We were just actually saving the money for the trip. And so the thing about being blinded to it, I mean, what can one do to actually turn around that narrative so that people start thinking that, actually, if I have 45,000 and 11 other people who are friends of mine have that, why don't we put it together and start a business here? Why do people not even consider that? And if the question, how do we make people start considering that?
Yes, I suspect that this is going to be a long haul, unless, of course, if you were sort of like, those socialist states who just lock their before you go out, I got to give you the approval to go out. But most seriously, you see, this is going to be one of those sort of cluster answers. There are so many things.
There's things, as we saw in the report, so many aspects to it. Yeah.
So many aspects to it. Yeah. Before you can inspire confidence, people will feel that ownership, wanting to remain here and that sort of thing. Sure. But I think we are a long way from there. The whole narrative, the stories we tell ourselves, that whole decolonizing, that mental element that has to go through. I mean, the economy as well, physically, that has to be put right. So there must be certain infrastructural, be it institutional, physical, whatever. There has to be a certain infrastructural developments, as it were, before we begin to want to stay here. Perhaps that would affect psychologically, mentally, which is the difficult frontier. That's the most difficult frontier in our battle.
Without a doubt. Mr. Burge, thanks for that. And as my colleague says there, that really the mental one is probably the kind of hardest barrier to kind of overcome. And I suspect in a year's time we'll be doing a similar story or several similar stories. I don't see it ending anytime soon. Well, thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. And now another thing that's recurring is, of course, some things are seasonal, including the rain. And what's also seasonal seems to be our unpreparedness for the rain. You think, what on earth is he talking about? Have a look at this clip.
Last night, Gambians living around the Kanifing municipality and the West Coast region experienced the first rain of the season, bringing excitement to many. However, this season also brings disasters, especially floods, which have a huge economic impact on countries. Last year, over 51,000 Gambian residents were affected by floods. The Department of Water Resources has released rainfall predictions for July through to September this year. Annual rainfall is predicted to likely be normal to likely below normal in the Gambia. Specifically, the predicted rainfall figures indicate a 25% chance of above normal rainfall, 45% chance of near normal rainfall, and 30% chance of below normal rainfall.
As you can see from those pictures there, I think what the authorities should be telling us is take swimming lessons. Mr. Mboj, we had what in Sierra Leone they would call a drop of rain. And you and I came to work on Monday. I think it was, no, Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever, and there were floods in some of the streets. And I mentioned in the lead up to that about the kind of seeming unpreparedness for it. We'd seen in the clouds, and so we kind of predicted that it was going to rain, but there'd been no announcement, no official announcement. Again, this kind of unpreparedness. Why is that?
Well, it's the whole story, isn't it? This is like a chorus.
Yeah.
Now it's a refrain. Every year, the same things happen, and we see it in other areas as well. We see it right across the board. There appears to be sort of a lack of organizational now.
You know, there was a piece which, as I'm speaking to you now, I actually wish that that was the bit I had shown, because the chap from the, I think it was Water Resources or the, whichever one is responsible for the forecasting, said that they couldn't just go on air and broadcast. It had to be sent and sanctioned by government before they could make an announcement of the first kind of predictions of rainfall. I mean, that's a nonsense.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
As if we have
and I wish I'd shown that clip.
Yeah,
because people think I'm making it up.
Then you wonder, because sometimes though I wonder, is it that they're required to do that by the government, or is it that they think that they should do it?
Yeah.
So let's be careful here, because I think we've seen quite a bit from the Janet Commission
and even
the
IEC, and even IEC as well.
That's it, exactly. Yes. So we've seen people's attitudes, people who lead some of these institutions, how they really turn monsters into monsters. In many ways, they start worshipping, they start doing things where they try to preempt you. They think that this is what you might like.
Quite.
When really you perhaps didn't ask for it. So they're just so eager perhaps to keep their jobs. I'm sorry to say this, but they're just so eager to keep their jobs. They compromise the integrity of the institutions. And sometimes it's not the president's fault, I suspect. We must take responsibility. There has to be that way of thinking.
You know, so I said to my reporter in closing, I said, you should have asked the chap, so what would have happened if you'd broadcast it on radio before it had been sanctioned? Going to get arrested?
You know.
Nonsense, honestly. Anyway, thanks for that. Well, the rains are here, and we have to live with them, unfortunately. And as I said, take swimming lessons, because...
But there was an important point I think he brought out when he said that littering in gutters is so serious in the flooding. So perhaps that's something that we can do.
We should take ownership of it.
You see, my suspicion is this, Ade. Now, for our democracy to sort of take wing, to move on, civil society will play a huge role in this. I suspect the politicians will be too distracted by the politicking in many ways. And then therefore, public institutions really wouldn't function as they should, because there's really no proper political oversight. This is where civil society comes in. So you have organizations like Gambia participate, and the research center when they challenge government, and we saw what happened in the Supreme Court. So civil society must nudge them in the right direction.
Sure, sure.
It seems that's really where our democracy, in many ways, its survival would be anchored.
Sure, sure.
That's my suspicion.
I have to agree with you on that one very, very strongly indeed. Yes, indeed. And now the next couple of stories about voters' registration. And Mr. Mboj there just nicely led us into it by mentioning civil society organizations. And of course, they have a role to play and they have an interest in the whole voter registration process, including this, as you'll see from this clip.
Or insufficiently oriented in performing their observatory role, leading to interference in the work of IEC officers.
In the process of registration also, the party agents were found to be recording details of people who came to register. When that is against the practice, it's against the regulation. What they are supposed to do is to take the head count, the number of people that are registered, and where they have that, they take the details of those particular people, but at the end of the process, not during the process.
I chose that clip, Mr. Mboj, because I wanted to directly point a finger at the political parties. They've been making all the noise, and yet this independent coalition of CSOs, civil society organizations, have looked at them and said, look, you're sending people out to be party agents who are meant to be observing what is going on, and they're not trained, they're not properly briefed, and actually they're obstructing the process. Now, who's going to hold them to account?
Absolutely. Well, the voters. At some point, they will show you, and us. We should bring these things out. It's quite scandalous. One would have thought that, you know, we have known for a long time that we were going to have voter registrations.
Quite.
In fact, it was postponed for a long time.
Well, indeed, yes.
You know what I mean? They had all of this time. Surely they could have prepared their agents. There was a process. Well, imagine that there was a process, that they knew what the process was and what was their role. How could they execute that monitoring role efficiently? Here we're being told that according to this body, anyway, poorly equipped.
Yes, quite.
They're poorly equipped, insufficiently trained, oriented. So they really didn't know what to do. And then therefore they were interfering really with the IEC officers.
Yeah, quite. You know, so, because the whole thing about, you know, freedom of information and so on, you should not pass on personal information, sensitive personal information. And apparently these party agents were actually taking down people's names as they registered. They're not allowed to do that.
Can't do that.
You know, and I'm glad that they were called out on this, because it's quite a serious breach. You know, but one wonders, you know, we'll revisit this in a week or two's time, because really I was quite concerned about it when I heard it from my colleague Choi. And what are you saying that this happened? He said, yes. He said, wait till you see the piece. And when I heard it, I thought, no, somebody's telling fibs here. But the guy said, no, it's in our report, and we've actually listed where, you know, the specific locations where it happened. And there were so many instances where it happened that it wasn't just an accidental, occasional thing. It was everywhere, because evidently they hadn't been trained in the job they were doing. All they needed was a party card, and somebody said, go and be an agent there. And that was about it. You know, they hadn't been told, this is your job as an agent, this is what you can do, and this is what you can't do. Why have the political parties, as you said, there was this kind of a break when there was no, why didn't they train the people? Absolutely.
It's quite revealing. And these are the parties vying to come and run government.
Can't even run your own party.
You cannot even run your own party. I mean, they have a huge responsibility, really, with all the cheating and maybe you might even get double registrations, you know, with all the shenanigans, as it were. They can be the party that will help. But again, when you have sort of these political, when you're absorbed in politically wanting to win,
that's right.
Then if you're not careful, you might compromise all sorts of things, and then you'll begin to deceive yourself, because then you wouldn't see it as compromising. So the temptations, I'm not sure how to put it, how people can resist the temptations, because the stakes are high. We can understand why. In Africa, you know, politically, when you win, you go to the State House, all sorts of goodies are waiting for you.
You become a king.
You become king. So you realize really how much some people would put into this. They will compromise every marrow, like a morality in them. So this is the challenge. Yeah. So we will need our law courts. Perhaps this is going to be one of the most litigious electoral cycles in our history.
I've already said to colleagues, this is going to be challenged at almost every step of the way.
Absolutely.
I can guarantee it.
So the courts must be ready.
Sure.
The police must be ready. You can just imagine.
But the political parties need to have their own house in order.
Their own house, you don't want stuff like that. Yeah. The enmity, sometimes one can smell, as it were, literally, the enmity between, there are two parties. So all of us, civil society, the press, so let's brace ourselves for what can potentially be interesting.
Quite a bruising one.
You live in interesting times.
Indeed. The Chinese will say. Indeed. And thank you for that. And now on to another matter, again to do with voter registration. And if you're thinking, gosh, why all this stuff about it? This is an important year for the Gambia. I was saying in another context to somebody else, this country is still getting to grips with what it means to be a democracy, a proper democracy, which is why we now have 17 or 18 political parties. But this time we decided to go and visit different areas where the voter registrations were taking place. And on this occasion, we went to Kanifing municipality, which is where our office is based. Have a look.
Here, we were told that there is only one registration center expected to cater for almost 20,000 inhabitants around this area. The IEC supervisor, Ibrahim Adiba, said the process is going smoothly despite a few hiccups.
Yeah, definitely. That is the crowd of the people, because their area people are too much. There are many people in this area, so that is the problem. But inshallah, they will all get registered. Yeah, inshallah. It's just that the crowd is too much. That's why many people, we cannot register all of them on the same day.
Now, when I bang on about having streets that have names and house numbers, people think I'm just making this up. Now, imagine if you had all of that. You can say everybody from street X to street Y can register at such and such a time on such and such a day, and you stop all the nonsense and you stop all the chaos. Mr. Mboj, again, we go back to the fact that this registration process was delayed. Why are we getting situations where in some areas people are having to work beyond the cut-off time? Because there have been times when people have actually threatened the people and say, no, you're not going home at 5 because, we've queued. And then, of course, there was an announcement that they were told that as long as somebody is in the queue before 5 o'clock, that person has to register. I've been having arguments with people on Twitter and on WhatsApp about that, because I don't think it's fair on the staff, because apparently they're not getting overtime. So if people are in the queue and there are 100 people in the queue by 5 o'clock who have not registered, they said they have to be registered. But again, we talked about unpreparedness regarding the rain and so on. This is another instance of that, surely.
Big time. Come on, it's the organizational ineptitude. Yeah. Absolutely, and these infrastructural deficits, such as you said, if they had street names, how that would actually help them to organize it much better. Absolutely, that's one element, and we'll keep on saying it for God knows how long. But again, then the people now, our response, this is also quite scandalous as well. I mean, you've got 44 days. Even without the street names and stuff, I don't think it's beyond their ken to come up with a scheme.
Some kind of zoning.
Some kind of zoning, some kind of scheme that would allow you to organize the registrations much more efficiently. So sometimes I think we keep on banging about, we don't have money, we don't have personnel, we don't have equipment, we don't have this. This is where you need imagination. If your heart is really in the job, somehow imaginatively you would come up with some kind of scheme that can work. I think there's been a lack of creativity in most of the things we do in many ways.
When it was previously postponed and we were told circumstances beyond our control, and then people started leaking what they thought were resource constraints and so on, many of us, myself included, thought actually what they're doing is they're using this as an opportunity to actually get properly prepared. How wrong I was. I mean, they don't seem to have been doing anything of the sort, but, this one, I think, one to revisit, just as we have to revisit other ones as well. But the ineptitude is quite staggering.
Absolutely, and we must insist I hope that the president will start doing this. If I'm going to appoint you to any position in government, you know, I'll tell you that I know that you don't have much resources. We know that. We know that the personnel, there's something there. We know that the equipment, there's a problem, all of it. So this is it. Don't come back and tell me we don't have resources. I want somebody with the creative sort of flight, as it
who
were.
can think outside the box.
Thinking outside the box. You can, So, and we want results. That's the sort of talent, Gambian talent.
So you say to them, these are the constraints.
Absolutely.
With those constraints, what can you deliver?
What can you deliver?
Can you deliver?
Can you deliver?
Yeah.
That is it. So there's no point. Otherwise, we'll just be spending, I don't know, forever. Oh, we don't have this. We don't have that. So, okay, fine. We don't have that. So what next?
Yeah, fine. Right. What next? What next is commercial break. And we'll take one right now and join us after this break. So don't go away. We'll have 5 more stories. Stay with us. Welcome back after that quick break. And if you're just joining us for whatever reason, you might have been busy doing who knows what, you're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review, and I'm Adedarami, and here with me co-presenting is Mr. Mamadou Mbodj. Mr. Mbodj, we've had 5 cracking stories, 5 more cracking ones to go. So let's get cracking. The next one, to do with human rights violations. If you've been in the Gambia since the TRRC started and concluded, you would have heard nothing but a litany of violations. But recently, the Gambian Center for Human Rights Violations issued a report. Have a look at this clip.
He calls on Gambians to support the transitional justice process.
To participate and be part of the process. And it demands patience. And it demands the complete and totally political will of our government of the day to fully implement recommendations that will be submitted to the President by the TRRC. So I call upon each and every Gambian.
Just before we go into the story, just so you know, I took issue with the Gambian Center because they spell center the American way. But that's one of my peeves. But on a more serious note, Mr. Mbodj, 1994 to 2016, we all know what that denotes. And I'm not sure if you've read the report. Literally, in fact, I was going to bring it in because it's literally sitting on my desk. And I read it. It's not thick, but they list individual cases, and some of them really quite harrowing. And not all of them actually came in front of the TRRC. Human rights violations. But there we heard a recurring phrase: we hope the recommendations of the TRRC will be taken up by the government. What on earth could they be talking about, Mr. Mbodj?
No, absolutely. But first here, the report. I mean, anybody who just listened to the TRRC, now we've got a sense of what happened.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean? Perhaps this is adding to the evidence, but the basic narrative is really the same. Just the basic narrative is the same. So yes, implementations of the recommendations.
We don't know what the recommendations will be.
We do not know what the recommendations will be.
We keep hearing people say.
But do we have any guide?
Well, yes.
I mean, let's go back to South Africa.
Yes.
And then in Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone.
You had your absolutely. Well, if we look at the examples there, then there is cause to be slightly worried.
Yes, and I said this on a previous discussion we had, Mr. Mboj, and I said I didn't want to say this to dishearten anybody or put anybody off, but I think the reason I mention it then and I'll mention it now is that I want Gambians actually to prepare themselves to hold government's feet to the fire and say, you know, don't be like Sierra Leone, don't be like South Africa. Sierra Leone ended up with a 1,000-page report, hardly any of which recommendations have been implemented. And in fact, the ones that were quite, in many people's eyes, quite dreadful. You know, the people who were the perpetrators, because they didn't want them to return to the bush, they ended up giving them lots of money every month. And yet the victims got very little. And I think that's why we mention it. That's why I mention it, because I want Gambians to be aware of that other countries have been down a similar path. And the report's implementations were hardly implemented.
Absolutely, this is the key, and I think with our model, the truth reconciliation, I think
and
there's huge,
huge
emphasis on reparation, on reconciliation and stuff. But again, you realize that reconciliation is a rather interesting journey. That's a curious one, but possible, and it depends on others. We think reparations and justice.
Yes.
Perhaps you need these two key elements that can make it easier for people to reconcile. I think there's a process, but I suspect there's a certain sequence as they were between all these different concepts. And what we've seen with the reparations, be it South Africa, be it Sierra Leone, a lot of people were not happy. That's a very curious one. And the justice element as well. Who would be prosecuted, who wouldn't be, who would be given amnesty?
Sure.
And you know, amnesty by its definition.
Yes, quite.
We're going to have to swallow some difficult stuff.
Let me throw something slightly controversial here. Is there a kind of African element that is probably absent from, because for all the West might talk about reconciliation and so on, a lot of it actually is kind of revenge couched in fancy words. And I say this because when I went with a British crew to do a program in Sierra Leone, they did not believe people who said, and literally, the guy who killed my daughter is down the road, but I've forgiven him. My British colleagues who went with me said, oh, they're just saying this for the camera or for the radio. I said, no, they mean it. And so they were like, how? And so we called one particular woman aside and interviewed her on a one-to-one. And I said, my British colleagues don't believe that you said on record that you've forgiven this guy. Why did you say that now and we're not recording? And she said, well, I said it because I meant it. I said, but how is it? She said, well, first of all, I'm a Muslim and my daughter is dead. And me hating this man is not going to bring my daughter back. And then she ended by saying, anyway, Sierra Leone is a small country. If I take revenge on that guy, his family will then take revenge and the cycle will. And my British colleagues were dumbfounded. And even to the time we left Sierra Leone 2.5 weeks later, they still refused to believe that people would be willing to forgive. So the point is there a kind of African element that the West, who are providing a lot of the money for what is happening with these in Sierra Leone and certainly in the Gambia, might not comprehend when it comes to the forgiveness and the reconciliation aspect of it?
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct there. And we will have a good deal of that. There's no denying it here. You will have a good deal
because
of that.
It's part of the
it's
culture.
Part of the culture. Yet,
yes.
You would have also a good number who will say, no.
We want justice.
We want justice.
Yeah.
So this is how it's going to be. And remember, this transition justice processes, when they began, it was really from Nuremberg.
Yes, yes.
This whole never again. They used it at Nuremberg,
same,
you know, absolutely just after the Second World War. But again, then remember, the emphasis was on justice. Sure. They were all tried. That sort of thing.
Right.
So the idea of the reconciliation and all the bits really came into being, perhaps with South Africa was the first.
It was.
In many ways. So in that sense, perhaps there's an African element. This is interesting that we started it. So yes, and perhaps it is because of our cultural frame that we had adopted it.
Yes, yes. Yes,
demonstrating just this forgiveness that you were saying. So we wanted to bring in that reconciliation.
Sure.
So possibly there is something to that, given our culture, the way we were grooved, as it were. People have got that element into it. So, but let's not kid ourselves. There will be a lot of disappointment.
I think so.
There's no denying that. But I just hope that the lessons, the younger generation, what they will learn, would that inspire, patriotism to do things, to build a better society? Because we will have seen, when we published the report, how institutions were destroyed. In the end, lives are destroyed. Culturally, you're being dragged. It sucks. Then everybody wants to go using the back way. I mean, we're living with the consequences. It's so awful. So we want the younger generation, I don't know, to rediscover that sort of pride. Can they do that?
And something to give them hope.
Yeah, something to give them hope and move on. For us, we are doomed. We are damned. I'm sorry to say that.
Let's not hope. Let's hope that's not the case. But thank you, Mr. Mboge. Now on to something else. And again, we're just talking about justice there. And this again leads us nicely onto the next story, our 7th story of this particular program. And this is about access to justice, but with quite a twist to it. What's the twist? Have a look at this clip.
This is just the beginning of a lifelong journey ahead of you. We rest our hopes on you. You are celebrated today as the first cohort of trainees to complete their Justice Defenders Paralegal training, unprecedented in the Gambia and West Africa. But let me ask you this: of what essence is this training when the knowledge acquired cannot be used to make a difference?
As the world looks to us in Uganda, in Kenya, and now in the Gambia, I believe that we can offer a message of hope. We can inspire those who look to us.
And there you heard Alexander McLean, who's the founder of Justice Defenders. And before we did the program that you saw on the news, I went online and looked at it. And it's quite an amazing concept, where you train people, not just the prison officers, but also actually inmates, to actually help fellow inmates kind of know their rights and defend their rights. Unique in West Africa, as was rightly said. They've had it in Kenya and Uganda, and Gambia is the first place in West Africa to have it. Quite something.
That's a splendid idea.
Yeah.
I mean, back 1998, 99 or so, I trained as a paralegal.
Oh, is that right?
Similar, but 3-week course, stuff like that. But even though I never did much paralegal work, but this is it, and I think it's been suggested, I've heard it suggested that the system, the structure of having paralegals must really be inbuilt in our judicial structure, as it were. We should have thought this a long time ago. A lot of people poor, they do not have access, cannot afford, these lawyers. So the paralegal would fill this huge gap. That's where people are not really getting, their fair share, as it were, of legal guidance, help. So this band, as it were, can help. It's a fantastic idea if we can just integrate more of it into the system.
When I was watching the story as it was unfolding from our reporter, I thought, what's the sustainability? And then they said, they've actually provided them with a full library of legal books, so they can refer to them all the while. So it's not just, you've been on this 3-week training, because if you don't have the possibility of reading up and keeping up to date, you lose it, because it's not every day or every week that you're going to be involved in this sort of thing, and then the 3 weeks would have been wasted. But apparently there's a full library of books that have been donated to them to actually sort of keep them on track and keep them informed.
Absolutely. And then imagine, and you are right, the sustainability. In Britain, lots of lawyers, they have paralegals. They work with paralegals. So imagine if it were integrated into it. So there's a certain kind of dispute, a certain kind of legal problem that a paralegal might be able to solve.
And speed up the process.
We
have, log jam in the courts, in almost every court. These are the kind of things that can be eased, and I was going to go there. And this is where you do need paralegals to kind of help, smoothen the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They all, we are told the work they're supposed to do, not enough personnel.
Yeah.
Well, these are some of the creative ways where you can speed up the process.
Correct. Yeah, good. So, Justice Defenders, thumbs up from me, and it sounds like thumbs up from Mr. Mboge as well. Thank you. And now we were talking about sustainability in another context. We're talking about justice, and we're talking about World Oceans Day and how little sustainability there is in how we treat the oceans. The Atlantic Ocean is just off our coast here. Have a look at this. It was World Oceans Day the other day.
Research has shown that the ozone covers over 70% of the planet, supporting humanity's sustenance and that of every other organism on Earth. The ozone produces at least 50% of the planet's oxygen. It is home to most of Earth's biodiversity and is the main source of protein for more than 1 billion people around the world. An estimated 40 million people are being employed by ozone-based industries by 2030. Even though the ozone benefits us all, it is in danger and needs our help. According to the UN, 90% of big fish populations have been depleted and 50% of coral reefs destroyed. We are taking more from the ozone than we replenish.
Now, we've always known that we're taking more than we replenish, but to hear from the UN that 90% of the big fish population has been depleted. Mr. Mboj, you and I are both humans, I think. What is it about us human beings that we can exhaust to the point of finishing what should be something that should be sustainable and sustenance, literally, because it's our food? Why is it that there is this drive in the human psyche?
The sort of the creative, destructive bit. Yeah. And then, again, knowledge always comes to the scene towards the end.
Sure.
So you begin doing something, you really do not know how much damage you're doing, but again, until it's too late.
Yeah,
as the owl of Minerva, as Hegel would put it, the owl of Minerva comes at dusk.
Yeah.
So this is it. We're creative, we invent new things, we're excited and stuff. You know, we found new ways of fishing, as it were. We found new ways of doing things. But we will really have no idea, we cannot foresee the possible outcomes, all the possible outcomes, because there's no knowledge, there must be risk.
Now, we tried to Gambianize that story by referring back to something I think you and I discussed, which was the 5-month ban on night fishing that the Gambian authorities brought in, which was then disputed. But they said, you know, this was, and I think I wish they had done it on sort of announced it on World Oceans Day, because it would have made more sense then. But essentially, what they were saying was this was a conservation measure, and essentially that's what the UN has been saying that other countries should be doing. So is Gambia ahead of the curve?
I don't know. I mean, it's just night fishing. Remember?
Yes.
What difference would it have made?
I mean, it's for 5 months.
Yeah, for 5 months, yes. And then what will happen? I know that then you'll have more fish, as it were.
Yes,
they replenish, as it were. They stock up.
So
you get more. So that when you come back, oh boy,
there's more to.
There's more to catch. So this is it. Overall, what effect would it have? Would it be so significant, or is it just a minor thing? Mostly depends on what you do during the day. Can you enforce it? So really.
Well, I was going to come to the point, because we've kind of banned it for our own fishermen, but we've not banned it from trawlers that come from other countries, much more powerful countries than ourselves, and we don't have a navy to enforce, and so we're at the mercy of these, really.
So this is not simply a case of sort of ordering a ban on this. It must be effective. It must be efficient. I mean, you must be able to enforce it. That is where the meaning is. So the reality of things always sort of tend to undermine, as it were, the intention, the proclamations, the policy, and all of that. So we'll be at the mercy of that. So I really cannot measure, cannot judge whether really this is what we're talking about when we talk about conservation. The idea is one thing, the reality is quite another, and we know that in our environment, this is what happens.
Yeah.
So I cannot judge.
Far too often, and this is one instance when implementation and enforcement really needs to be effective. Thanks for that, Mr. Bush.
The latest ocean.
Yeah.
Maybe this is time we tell people. We used to know what 4 oceans. Apparently now there's Southern Ocean, Antarctica. We recently added to the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian,
yes, exactly.
and the like. Exactly.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for that. Yes. And now on to a completely different story, Mr. Mboch. This one has got people chatting quite a lot, but certainly not on Twitter, and certainly not in Nigeria. What am I talking about? Well, the Twitter ban in Nigeria. Have a look at this.
Following the deletion of the president's tweet on Wednesday, the information minister accused Twitter of hypocrisy because, according to the minister, the tech giant had deleted the president's tweet while ignoring violent messages from a separatist leader. Twitter, in its response in a statement on Friday, said it was investigating what it called a deeply concerning suspension of their operations by the Nigerian government. This is, of course, not the first time a presidential tweet has been deleted. Famously, former President Trump had some of his tweets deleted last year. There are an estimated 40 million Twitter users in Nigeria, many of whom have expressed outrage at the blocking of one of the main outlets.
A familiar voice there telling us that story, Mr. Mboch. A case of tilting at windmills, surely. Nigerians have largely just ignored it, just using VPN to get around it. And so you don't know where they're tweeting from. What was the point, really, of the ban?
That was it. It was just a tit for tat, wasn't it? To show you that I could also do this. We know that we're a huge country, large population, so therefore, that will have a dent on stuff. And we should be careful here. I'm really going to be careful here. Because as well, when I looked at Buhari's
the tweet
regarding Biafra, and from what we've read, we are not Nigerian, so we must be very careful here.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll treat them in the language that they understand.
Yes.
Oh, to me, that was uncomfortable. That was genuinely uncomfortable.
For sure.
So, according to Twitter, it was on the basis of that they brought it down.
They took it as hate speech and threatening, as a threat. Yes.
And that's a very sensitive area. And to some extent, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, and interestingly, in Nigeria, there's been very little support for it. And what's been also interested in that, some of the newspapers and some of the people writing in newspapers are saying that, actually, I don't even use Twitter, but I think the government's action is misguided. And they really have kind of overplayed their hand. But it's trying to show that we're a big country and we can do this kind of thing.
That's it, the tiger proclaiming its tigritude.
As you said in the piece. Yes.
Absolutely. So, but still, what this has done, I don't think the ban, the tit for tat will make much difference. People are going around it. But at least perhaps they'll start talking about Biafra again.
Well, this is it.
Yes. It has brought it out. Yeah. And they should be careful. There's some tension there, obviously, for the president to come out, with that tweet. There's something going there.
There is. And if you go on Facebook, there are several groups that call themselves Biafrans and quite active, and some of them have got tens of thousands of members. So it's there, and there is a danger of this kind of raising its head again. And so one to watch, Mr. Mboch. We're almost getting close to the end, but another story to do with Nigeria, smoothly on. And this time, he's been declared dead on at least 4 occasions before now. But this time, he really could be dead. Who am I talking about? Of course, Shekau, leader of Boko Haram. Have a look.
The leader of Boko Haram is again reported to have died, but the militant group is silent about the claims. According to reports, the incident occurred on 19 May, following the invasion of the terror group's stronghold in the Sambisa forest area by a column of Islamic State West Africa province fighters. A person purporting to be ISAAP leader, Abu Musab al-Banawi, said that Sekao killed himself on May 18 after detonating an explosive device that he was wearing. He said Sekao preferred to be humiliated in the afterlife than getting humiliated on earth.
Shekau of Boko Haram, who had long been a thorn in the side of Nigerian governments for quite a number of years. The previous leader was killed or died mysteriously in police custody, as we all know. And then Shekau took over leadership of Boko Haram and became an even more of a thorn in the side. But as was said there at the start of that, many times he'd been proclaimed dead, and sometimes, quite amusingly, he would be seen holding a newspaper proclaiming his death and saying, you know, they say I'm dead, here I am holding the newspaper announcing that I'm dead. Well, this time there's been no such announcement. Might he be dead this time?
Yes, and if it is actually true that he's dead really this time, well, good thing.
Yes. What is it? Because of who killed him?
Well, for me,
apparently an even more extreme group than the one that he led. Yes, he had been a thorn in the side of the Nigerian regime, but actually the ones who killed him seem to think he wasn't enough of a thorn in the side of the Nigerian regime, and have, you know, sworn allegiance to Islamic State.
Absolutely, so let them kill one another.
Yes.
Maybe next time somebody else from Sheikh House group will go and kill one of their members. Okay. So let them continue to do that. So in the end, what's the difference? That's exactly, I was going to come to that, you know. Right. If it is true that he's dead, good, let him go. But what difference would it make in the end? Oh, this is a much bigger problem than Sheikh House.
It really is.
in many ways.
Because the whole of the kind of belt of the kind of West African and the Sahel belt is infested now with these Islamist groups. They're destabilizing so many countries, and you know, countries that had previously not had anything of this nature and are having to contend with it. Yes. And so Shekau's passing, as you rightly said, might not be mourned. People were saying, yeah, let them kill each other. Yes.
Absolutely. And this is it. Remember that analysts, they've been warning for a long time, even before it really began to turn into a problem. They were warning for a long time that Africa would be next.
And some of us disbelieved it. I say, including myself, I have to say, I thought there might be pockets, but not to the extent that is actually proven to be.
And look at it, even in our neck of the woods, we're really in trouble here. We're in the woods as we are, because in Mali, we know what's happening in Mali.
That's right.
And then if they can crack through Mali, they're here. This is our doorstep.
They're on our doorstep.
They are on our doorstep.
Sure.
Senegal. So it's really very serious.
It is.
Threat.
And, it's a serious threat, and one I think we have to take very, very seriously. Mr. Boach, on that note, we've come to the end of the program, and just to say thank you for your insight and for your comments, and to the viewers, as ever, thank you for watching. Until the next time, it only remains for me to say goodbye and join us again next week. Goodbye.